Welcome back, welcome back. One of the most important subjects up for discussion at the G8 summit this week has, of course, been global warming. But what's seen by many as tomorrow's problem is a very real problem today for the people of the Himalayas. There are constant reports of melting and collapsing glaciers and growing glacial lakes, bringing dangers to the region and also to the climbers and trekkers who bring prosperity to the area. But can those climbers maybe help to bring about change themselves, as well as the G8 leaders? One of the world's best-known mountaineers, the one and only Chris Bonington, is leaving for an expedition to the Himalayas later this month, 47 years since he first climbed there. I spoke to him a little earlier and asked him if he had noticed that the conditions there were clearly getting worse.
I wouldn't say they're getting worse. They're changing and they're different in the sense that there's no doubt about it that a lot of the glaciers have actually begun shrinking. But this in some ways can be a benefit to climbers. For instance, the Khumbu Glacier back in the 60s and the 70s was by far the most dangerous part of Everest, and that's where most people died. In the last 10 years, I don't think anyone's died actually in the Everest icefall because there's less pressure on the great kind of massive ice that there is there. There's less collapses, therefore, of the ice towers and the walls, and therefore it is slightly safer. Other areas are more dangerous. But I think really, as far as climbers go, it's no big deal. I mean, there's some more risks, some less risks, and no more than that. Where the real concern is for the actual people who live in those Himalayan valleys, and also the people who are dependent on the flow of water from the glacier rivers, from the snowmelt, down in the plains. And there's no doubt about it, there is a fear that if there is less snow in the Himalayas, there's less ice in the Himalayas, that could present a problem.
That's the problem. More than so the dangers to the climbers, that's just one of those things, as you said earlier.
It's just one of those things, yeah.
But this is really serious, the lives of the people who live there.
Yes, very much so.
What can therefore be done about it?
Well, I think that it's the duty of the climbers, and it's something that we do as well, is that we're as vocal as possible, and our organisations, for instance, the British Mountaineering Council and the UIAA, which is the international body of mountaineering, does use what influence it can with governments to actually encourage them to take the steps that we need to do throughout the planet.
Is the whole question of global warming affecting mountaineering and so on all over the world in addition to the Himalayas, or is the Himalayas a particularly cogent example?
No, it's happening all over the world. I mean, for instance, I live in the English Lake District, and 15 years ago we were absolutely sure of having at least 4 to 5 weeks of snow cover on the Lakeland Hills. We live on the side of a hill, and for instance my kids loved it because we were sure to be blocked in by the snow for at least a fortnight every year, and that meant they couldn't go to school and they could go tobogganing. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had practically no snow at all, and there's certainly not enough snow in the Lake District in the winter, either to go winter climbing or to go ski touring. So there we have seen a big difference. In the European Alps, the difference is absolutely dramatic, and the mountains are falling apart. The mountains in many places, the steep peaks, are held together by the ice that's actually kind of permanently there in the cracks between the rocks. And as that ice melts, if you like, the permafrost goes, you have huge rockfalls, and the mountains have become quite dangerous. So yes, we can see a dramatic difference.
And in Europe and places, areas like the Alps and so on, is that part of this effect?
And this is part, yes, this is definitely part of global warming. There's no doubt about it that things are getting very, very much warmer. And of course, if you go to the poles, to the North Pole, the actual ice coverage over the seas is getting less. You go to the South Pole, and there you have an interesting development in the sense that the actual ice around the Antarctic continent is breaking away, but this is actually causing a greater precipitation of snow actually on the Antarctic plateau. So the Antarctic plateau is actually growing in height. It's not diminishing, because whereas in the past it was one of the most extreme deserts in the world with practically no precipitation at all, now because the water is getting closer to the continent, you have a higher precipitation. So there are, in fact, there's pluses and minuses right the way through.
Are you optimistic, put it that way, that the world will respond to global warming in time?
I only hope it does. I think the real problem, though, comes in to a degree, the selfishness of various interest groups around the world. And I mean, I think the thing that is needed most of all is for the United States to start taking the real lead that we'd like to see it taking, and that's a real lead in cutting down its pollution. I mean, it is actually doing more than any other country. And how on earth they can expect, for instance, China and India to limit their using or throwing out of greenhouse gases when they're actually putting out considerably less than America. And of course, America and the West is depending upon Asia, particularly China and India, to actually do all its manufacturing. So I think in a way there's got to be a level playing field, and I think America definitely needs to start taking the lead that we'd like to see.
Well, Chris, thank you very much for joining us. Hope you'll come back and join us again when you get back from this trip and tell us the way it looks in the Himalayas this June.
Well, I'd love to, and we're taking some film, so we should be able to show you what it's like.
In a minute, I'll be talking to actor and campaigner Bill Nighy. That's after the news, which is next.